Hello and welcome to Midwest Writers Room. Our mission is to encourage, educate, and celebrate writers of the Midwest. I'm Luella Schmidt.
And I'm Ken Humphrey. Today we're interviewing Katrina Serwe. Katrina worked as a therapist, professor, and researcher in the field of occupational therapy for over 2 decades. She started poem walking after a delightful midlife crisis and ended up hiking the entire 1,200 miles of Wisconsin's Ice Age National Scenic Trail.
Katrina published a chapbook, First Steps by Brain Mill Press in 2025, that won the Brain Mill Press and Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets chapbook contest, and a full length collection of foraged poems, A Thousand Miles of Poetry, released this month with WWA Press. Her poems have been featured in a variety of publications, including Ploughshares, Blue Heron Review, The Solitary Plover, Scrawl Place, Portage Magazine, and Bramble. We are honored to welcome Katrina to Midwest Writers Room. How are you doing today?
I am happy to be here. Ken,
I
we're happy to have you.
thank you.
So we always start these episodes with talking about the person. Before we talk about the works and the creativity and everything else, we want to talk about the person. And I've got a two-part question to open to drop on you here. I mean, first off, if you can, please define what poem walking is for us. And then secondly, can you share more about what constitutes a delightful midlife crisis and why it led you to poem walking instead of something much more practical like buying a Porsche convertible?
Great questions, Ken. Poem walking is a beautiful made up hobby that involves going for a walk and then writing down the things that catch my attention. I thought I had creatively come up with this hobby all on my own, and then I realized that poets have been doing this for forever. Basho, way back in Japan in the 1500s, was walking and writing poetry. So it is a beautiful practice. And if you would humor me, I'd love to read you a poem that takes you on a little poem walk experience with me. Would you like to hear a poem? Great. This one is from my book, First Steps. And the poem was inspired by a hike on the Milwaukee River segment of the Ice Age Trail. And it's a narrative poem, so it takes you along on a poem walk with me. It's called Fly Song. July flies orbit my head, 100 buzzing thoughts in my favorite stretch of forest. The faster I walk, the more they multiply until I stop. And we listen to my breath and bird song through leaves playing in air, watch sunlight scatter in the still understory. I stand. The flies resume their orbit. I don't know what it means. Why is bird song beautiful and fly song maddening? Glacial grit slides under my feet. Sweat soaks through my sundress. At the green hand pump, I let iron flavored water spill into my thirst. Find the gift of a striped brown and white turkey feather. Laughing, swipe it through my cloud of flies. Ask it, what is the difference between the song of the bird and the fly? It answers, nothing. So poem walking in the midlife crisis, you had that moment when you realize that you're half dead and you probably have less than half your life to live. And all of a sudden there's a panic and you realize you've been doing everything you thought everybody else wanted you to do. And you're like, oh, I better start doing some of the things that I want to do. And that is walking and writing poetry. And so that was quite delightful. So no Porsche, walking and writing poetry, practically impractical and absolutely delightful.
I would say that's actually what the Porsche convertible is too. Practically impractical, but yours is a gift that keeps on giving. So um, the Ice Age Trail figures very prominently in your next work. Um, so talk a little bit about that. I guess I didn't realize we had 1,200 miles of trail in Wisconsin. Talk a little bit more about that. Did you work your way from one end of the trail to the other, or kind of how did you go through that?
Great question. The Ice Age Trail is absolutely magical, and we are special in Wisconsin. We're one of two states to have a national scenic trail that is entirely within our state. The piece that's really interesting about the trail is it's built and maintained primarily by volunteers, and it's a work in progress. So 700 of those miles is actually what we would think of as trail, single track dirt through the woods, through the fields. And the other 500 is on these little back roads that hook one segment to the next segment. And so you can walk segments, and if you hike the entire thing and become a 1,000-miler, you also hike the roads. So my process, I hiked these segments and became a segment hiker. And I hiked kind of randomly all over the place. I do one segment in the north, a segment in the south. And I have a poem that kind of describes that journey of segment hiking. It's called In the Middle. Would you like to hear it? It's inspired by a hike on the St. Croix Falls segment. So the trail in the west starts at a state park called St. Croix Falls, and it ends in the east at Potawatomi State Park. And this poem is a haibun. So it has a title, a section of prose, and then a haiku at the end, and the three work together. In the middle, at the western terminus, there is a stone with a plaque and a selfie station for a photo to commemorate an ending or a beginning. But I'm not ending here, and I started my hike on this segment before the beginning, before I was an adult, before I knew this was the Ice Age Trail and thought it was a loop along the river to climb rocks, look into potholes, gaze across the water, and wonder what it's like on that opposite bank called the Minnesota side. I'm not in a hurry. I don't need to be the first or fastest, not even a through hiker. I walk to find new buds, trilliums, evergreens, old growth forest, grouse, summer canopy shade, songbirds, wolf tracks, stream crossings, walnuts, lemon scent, fall color bright, frosted branches, the shape of glacial landscape etched in winter, the shape of my thoughts. At the eastern terminus, there is a stone with a plaque. I took my picture there, but it wasn't my beginning or ending. I started where I live, in the middle. I'll end in the middle, and I won't be done. Selfie station, on the river bluff, one view of a journey. And that's from my newest collection that will be out in April, so you get a sneak peek there.
Look at that. Breaking news here, Luella, as usual.
We are good at
So,
that.
yeah, over 1,000 miles. Yeah, I've got to believe that some stuff has happened during your hikes, probably some funnier than others. Drop us some good, funny stories or misadventures that happened to you along the way.
Oh, their misadventures, I think, are one of the most important parts of a journey. And I think my favorite misadventure was when I ended the trail, my last hike. And my last hike, I did not plan very well. I ended up with a road walk for my last hike. So 11 boring miles in November along a country road in Wisconsin. But it ended up having a great story. And I wrote a poem about it, of course. So I will read you the poem that was inspired from this connecting road walk from Taft Town Hall to the Lake 11 segment of the trail. And it is called Anxiety Remedy. I weave worry into safety nets. Self-start jumper cables, a blanket, and a first aid kit are in my trunk. I have insurance policies, wear bright orange in fall, plant trees to grow my own air. I had a plan that didn't work. And that's when I found it, late on a Sunday afternoon, after a shuttled hike with a friend on a mild December day in Mennonite country, where we'd seen more horses than vehicles, and her car did not want to start. A half bar of service called AAA roadside assistance for a 60 to 90-minute wait that became 8 a.m. tomorrow. There was an hour left of daylight and 11 miles back to my car, so I thumbed the first passing vehicle. The driver of the pickup truck hauling a trailered four-wheeler was in a hurry, but agreed to turn right instead of going straight on their way. We talked hiking and hunting, the beauty of horse's breath in winter, a moment's proof of life frozen in air. The driver wanted to be sure my vehicle started before leaving me, knowing that things didn't work out how I thought they would, that I couldn't do it all myself, and yet here I was back where I wanted to be. Thorpe's Quick Trip offered a silver moon of battery. We slid into the key fob that started my friend's car. We returned to our respective driving seats, and tonight I trust that we'll all make it home.
So 11 miles on a road that you weren't expecting. And, people in much more populated areas may not understand this, but it's important for us to know, was it paved? Was it gravel? Did it have sidewalks? Because that can make the experience completely different from one end to the other.
Yes, and you get all of those road types on the Ice Age Trail. This one was paved, country road, so a little bit narrow and quiet. So I wasn't sure there would be another vehicle coming down the road. So when that pickup truck came by, I said, help us out.
Yes, I can imagine, our Milwaukee or Chicago or Minneapolis listeners saying, "What do you mean you don't know if another truck is going to come by, another vehicle is going to come by? Where are you?" It's like, that's life up in Wisconsin. All right, Luella, should we dive into the WWA message?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, folks, just a reminder that our Vintage Wisconsin Writing Contest opened a submission on April 1st and runs through May 31st. This is held in honor of Wisconsin writing luminary Jerry Apps, and we're seeking your tales of people, businesses, culture, lifestyle, or events. Get your submission in today. Learn more at wiwrite.org under the Contests tab.
All right, we are back with more Katrina. I'm wondering if you would tell us a little bit about your writing process. And if you have, you're going off on these hikes and getting all this wonderful inspiration, and I'm wondering what it looks like once you have to kind of put things together.
Great question. I always carry a little notebook with me. And when I'm out on the trail, I just write down words, thoughts that capture my attention. Once in a great while, a poem will take shape on the trail, but more often it's more of a word bank that I take home with me. And then the poem shapes in my mind slowly over time. And whether the poem took shape on the trail or back home, there are many revisions. So the process, I work through a poem and then I put it away and then I bring it back out and I look through it again. And it's interesting, the process of writing the poem uses a different part of my brain than the process that revises and edits the poem. And I think the walking helps with that. The first part, it gets me more into that creative fluid space where I'm not worried about what the end product is going to look like. I'm just gathering the feelings, the ideas, the shapes, the sounds that might be in the poem. And then my more analytical brain comes in later and I'll start picking it apart and I'll do things like look at the verbs. How much work are these verbs doing? What is the flow like? What is the rhythm? And that's where the technical piece comes in.
I feel like verbs in particular are a way to really level up your writing as a prose writer, as just general fiction or any kind of writing. There's a lot of magic to be had there by finding the exact right verb. And I guess I'm always struck by, um, I don't know, I feel like poetry is such a great training ground for other things in addition to being a, beautiful way of art by itself. Do you have any, wisdom that you can share with listeners who either are poets or are just general fiction, nonfiction writers on how they might use poetry to improve their skills?
Definitely. I agree with you, Luella. I think poets and prose writers, we both really strive to show rather than tell. And I think poetry can really help you hone your storytelling through images. A great poem won't spell out the emotions that you want the reader to feel, but it'll present images and sounds and cadences that help the reader get to that place on their own. And I think through studying poetry, it can help prose writers really immerse their readers into a story. Now, granted, I am not a published fiction author, so take that for what it's worth. There are many other experts in the field.
Sure.
I
But
think,
I definitely see sort of that crossover opportunity, and other writers have spoken about the fact that they either both write fiction and poetry, or that they really, found ways to expand their own skill set by studying poetry. So, um, how about, we talk a lot about, obviously you must have, nature is a very big muse for you. That goes without saying, but I'm wondering if you have any other big things that kind of motivate you in your life, if you have or feeling have a dry spell of some sort.
yes, I'll share what surprised me most that was common to both my hiking journey and to my writing journey. I started my hike off and I started writing, thinking that it was something I was going to do all by myself. And I do love time alone. I have some introvert tendencies, and I did enjoy a lot of time to myself. And my writing process, I started out, I am a self-taught poet, so I read a lot of craft books and I did a lot of exercises on my own. But as I hiked the trail, I met fellow hikers, and my trail friends became a really important part of my journey. And in my writing life, the same thing happened. I started out thinking there were no other poets around me, that I was kind of an odd person having her own delightful midlife crisis that no one else would really understand. And then a friend of mine who's actually a farmer introduced me to a poet that lived nearby named Catherine Gall, because they went ballroom dancing together. And Catherine said, "Well, you know about Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets, right?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, you need to join them." So I joined that organization and I met all of these beautiful poets. And they introduced me to Wisconsin Writers Association. And I ended up taking poetry critique groups with fabulous Wisconsin poets like Marilyn Taylor, Ronnie Hess, Peggy Razga. And my writing process just blossomed from there. I found that taking workshops, talking with other poets, going to conferences like WWA, it just lit me up and gave me inspiration and new ideas, new ways of looking for my poetry and new ways of writing. And I never would have guessed that that social aspect would be so important to my journey. It was a beautiful surprise. So I think my advice that I would pass on is, if you are a solitary writer, mix it up and try some of the social aspects of writing. And if you've been primarily social, maybe mix it up and try working on your own, try a craft book or writing prompts. And that back and forth, I think, can really stir things up and create inspiration that you wouldn't have necessarily found if you wouldn't have done something out of your ordinary.
That's really great advice. I love that you found community, just the right amount of community, both on the trail and in our amazing writing associations that we have around the state, including the Fellowship of Poets. Shout out to Sister Org, Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets. So let's talk about your secret sauce. This is a question we like to ask our guests that whatever it is other than writing that you nerd out about, that is a passion of yours, that anything, it could be anything you like. What do you got for us?
Oh, I will share that I am learning how to draw and paint watercolor.
That's
And
a good
that's
one.
been a very humbling experience. The interesting thing about drawing is whatever age you left off when you last drew, that is the age that your drawing will look like when you start again. And
Helpful information.
Brilliant observation.
yes, so I left off drawing as a fifth grader. So I had some nice, like fifth grade level art. But drawing and watercolor, it brings me into the present moment and slows me down and helps me really look at things carefully. So it's good for my mental health, but I also think it influences my writing. When you slow down and are in the moment, writing blossoms in that space.
I would
And
agree. You
I
just get
have come,
the creative juices pumping, right? Regardless of the source.
yes, and I have come a little ways. I'll do a little show and tell. Here's the last
Oh man,
watercolor painting that I did.
that's pretty impressive. Much better than a fifth grader.
I've come a little ways.
That's right.
And there's more to go, which is delightful. I like to always be learning something.
Have you ever attended any of those wine and painting sessions that some places, some bars around town will do?
Yes, and I love them. They're hilarious. My favorite part is, from my past life as an occupational therapist, one of the theories is that we all want to be masterful at what we do. We all want to succeed. And you go to a wine and paint to relax, and we're all there and we want to create this great painting. And it makes me laugh at myself and others. I once with a family member who's not into painting. It's supposed to be relaxing and she's working so hard and like swearing under her breath and
We
we're
recently,
supposed to be relaxing.
yeah, I agree. We recently did that as a family, and yeah, it was anything but relaxing. I think it was more stressful for them, people doing it because they're out of their comfort zone. Like people, people in my family who have never painted anything, right now are asked to, paint this vase, and yeah, the amount of stress that they encountered trying to do that and follow the instructions probably superseded any wine that they managed to gulp down. So tell our listeners where they can find you out in the virtual world.
I have a website, katrinaserwe.com. I've got connections to my social media there, and I have events listed on that page and poetry that I publish online. So if you want to read some poetry, it's there. I also have a map on that page that is a map of the Ice Age Trail, and it has little trail markers that you can click on, and you'll get a haiku for every segment of the Ice Age Trail. I am
Nice.
on Instagram, just Katrina Serwe. And then on Facebook, I'm backwards. I'm Serwe Katrina on Facebook.
We will absolutely drop the link to that site there. I mean, an interactive map with haikus. Luella, we have never come across something like
I
that from
know.
another author.
Every time we have a poet on, we get something super cool. So
Yes, yep. And I do want to touch on something you said before, Katrina, before we move on, that joining these workshops just lit you up was the actual words you used. And I love that because that actually encapsulates what I think happens to a lot of people where they know they want to write, but they're maybe unstructured, right? Unfocused. They don't know how to write. They just know they want to do it, and they get into these classes, whether it's ours or other classes or around other peers, and for some reason it just lights them up because now they find their grind. As Luella is fond of saying, joining WWA helped her find her tribe. And it sounds like you had a similar journey through Fellowship of Poets and on the WWA. You got lit up and you found your tribe. That's a beautiful thing.
Definitely.
All right, Luella, is it time for good news?
It is definitely time for good news. Listeners, if you want to share yours with us, email us at podcast@wiwrite.org. We'd love to celebrate with you. What do you got, Ken?
So in addition to this episode, Katrina is going to be highly active in April. As already noted, WWA Press is releasing her book, 1,000 Miles of Poetry, with a launch party on April 18th in West Bend. Katrina will also be leading a WWA workshop on poetry, April 21st, called Finding Poetry in Your Walk. If you want to know more about that, go check out wiwrite.org under the events tab. All right, so my good news, right? We're recording this March 30th. This weekend, all the golf courses around me opened up. So, of course, myself and the family had to get out and do a nice round, beautiful weather yesterday. But really, March Madness. I'm not a big March Madness fan. I don't follow any brackets, but the UConn last second buzzer beater over number 1 Duke was just, it was a great, great thing. I didn't even watch the full game. I was just kind of half paying attention at the end. And I don't really have a betting favorite. I don't care who wins. I just like really good games. And that was incredible. And also, so many brackets out there are now busted. They had Duke going all the way. Katrina, what do you got for good news?
April is Poetry Month, so there is so much good news. But I will highlight one thing I'm excited about. The editor of my book that's coming out, 1,000 Miles of Poetry, Lisa Lickle, she created a book club kit to go with the book. And I've never heard of that for a poetry book. She created discussion questions, and then we worked together and created poetry games that you can play if you have a group. And then there's some recipes in there. So I talked about in my writing, the solitary to social journey. We have that for the book as well. You can read the poem Solitary, and then you can get together and use the book club kit to create a party experience around it. And I think that's so fun that was Lisa Lickle's brainchild. She's an absolute genius.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Where would we be without Lisa? The things she comes up with,
know.
just unreal. How about you, Luella? What do you got for good news?
Oh, my good news. I think I am really excited to go back to Minnesota this coming weekend to hang out with some family. It's an Easter weekend. And so it's been a while since I've been able to do that. So boring and simple, but very excited about it. Thank you for sharing your good news. And again, listeners, that's podcast@wiwrite.org if you'd like to join in the fun.
All right. And at this time, I want to thank Katrina for coming on, joining us here. If you've enjoyed this episode, listeners, please 5-star rating in your podcast app of choice. This is the type of action that helps us find other writers, helps grow the program. Thanks for hanging out with us in the Midwest Writers Room. I'm Ken Humphrey.
And I'm Luella Schmidt. Words ignite imaginations and spark change. Never underestimate the power of storytelling.
Midwest Writers Room is a production of the Wisconsin Writers Association. Writing and editing by Luella Schmidt and Ken Humphrey. Sound design and editing by Ken Humphrey. Music for the Midwest Writers Room was written by Michael Vermeer C. For more information, please visit wiwrite.org/podcast. Thank you.